The United States government is actively erasing the citizenship of naturalized Americans.
Yeah, it's a massive shift in how we define belonging in this country. I mean, we're talking about taking away the fundamental right to even call yourself an American.
Right. And it's happening on a scale we really haven't seen in generations. Just yesterday, May 9, 2026, the Department of Justice dropped a massive bombshell.
Oh, yeah. The new filings.
Exactly. They filed cases to strip U.S. citizenship from 12 foreign-born Americans. And when you look at the names on this list, I mean, they are absolute extremes.
They really are.
You've got Victor Manuel Rocha, right? A guy who operated as a spy for communist Cuba going all the way back to the 1970s.
Wow.
Yeah. And then you've got Ali Yusuf Ahmed al-Nouri, who is an alleged leader within al-Qaeda.
Goodness.
And there's even a convicted child sexual abuser in the mix. So the DOJ is arguing that these individuals flat out lied. They concealed these heinous crimes when they originally applied for their citizenship.
So now the government is stepping in to basically unmake them as Americans?
Exactly. They're trying to rewind the clock and pretend that grant of citizenship just never happened.
Which makes sense from a law and order perspective, right?
Yeah.
If you lied to get the ultimate privilege of being an American, the government has a duty to correct that.
Totally. Now, real quick, I need to give a mandatory disclaimer to you, the listener. The source material for today's deep dive contains some very politically charged viewpoints.
Yeah, we're looking at a pretty stark divide here.
Right. On one hand, we've got aggressive law enforcement actions from the Trump administration, prioritizing national security. On the other hand, we're looking at furious pushback from left-leaning groups like the ACLU.
Right.
Our mission here isn't to take a side or endorse a political viewpoint. We are strictly here to report the facts from the sources. We want to unpack how the government actually revokes citizenship, explore the history, and explain the legal tactics.
So you can understand the debate for yourself. Because honestly, the mechanics of how the government revokes citizenship are widely misunderstood.
Yeah, so let's get into that. We just established the DOJ is bagging spies from the 70s and alleged terrorists.
Right.
Most people hear that and think, well, great, get them out of here, protect the borders.
Absolutely.
But if they are suddenly catching a spy from 5 decades ago right now, they must have dramatically changed their rule book.
Oh, they did. They absolutely changed the rule book.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, to understand why this is accelerating, you have to look at an internal Department of Justice memo. This was issued on June 11, 2025.
Okay, last year.
Yeah. It was written by Assistant Attorney General Brett A. Shumate. And in this memo, he gave a very direct mandate to government attorneys. He told them to make civil denaturalization a top 5 priority for the civil division.
Top 5, wow.
Yeah. He instructed them to pursue these cases with maximum effort. They want to weed out the fraudsters.
And the statistics really show the whiplash here, right? Because for decades, this process was incredibly rare.
Very rare.
From 1990 to 2017, the DOJ only filed about 11 of these denaturalization cases a year.
Right. Mostly hunting down old Nazi war criminals who lied to get into the country after World War II.
Right. A very specific, very narrow target. But during the first Trump administration, that number skyrocketed to an average of 42 cases a year.
It did. And that 2025 memo expands the target list way beyond just the historical norms. It actually lays out 10 distinct priority categories.
Wait, 10 categories? Like what?
Well, they aren't just looking for war criminals and terrorists anymore. The net now includes gang members, sex offenders, and crucially, people who commit financial fraud.
Oh, wow. Financial fraud.
Yeah. We're talking about individuals involved in Paycheck Protection Program fraud, PPP fraud, as well as Medicare and Medicaid fraud, people ripping off the American taxpayer.
I mean, it sounds like the government traded in a sniper rifle for a massive fishing net. They are no longer just hunting the worst of the worst. They are scooping up anyone who broke the rules along the way.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. They're enforcing the rules.
But here's my question. If you are casting a net that wide, you run into a huge logistical problem. You can't put thousands of people through standard criminal trials overnight. The courts are backlogged for years.
Right, exactly.
So how are they doing it? They must be bypassing criminal court entirely.
You hit the nail on the head. That logistical hurdle is exactly why the 2025 memo specifically told attorneys to pursue civil denaturalization rather than criminal.
Okay.
Because the legal machinery between those two courts is fundamentally different.
So walk me through that. In a criminal denaturalization case, what does the playing field look like for the defendant?
Well, in criminal court, you get this standard constitutional armor you'd expect in the American justice system.
Right.
You get a jury trial. If you're poor and can't afford a lawyer, the court appoints a public defender for you.
Makes sense.
And there is a strict 10-year statute of limitations, meaning the government can't randomly decide to charge you for a lie you told on a form 30 years ago. And the biggest hurdle for the government is they have to prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest burden of proof we have. That makes sense when the stakes are losing your citizenship. But in civil court, all that armor basically vanishes, doesn't it?
Almost entirely. I mean, in civil court, there is no jury. One single judge hears your case and makes the final call.
Wow.
There's no right to a free appointed lawyer. If you can't afford an attorney to fight the federal government's entire legal team, well, you're on your own.
That's tough.
And most importantly, there is absolutely zero statute of limitations in civil denaturalization.
Wait, zero. So the government can dig up incomplete paperwork or, foggy evidence from 40 years ago and use it against you today?
Precisely. And their burden of proof is much lower. They don't need beyond a reasonable doubt.
What do they need?
They only need to present clear, convincing, and unequivocal evidence.
Okay.
It's a high bar for a standard civil case, but it's a massive step down from criminal court.
I have to push back a little on this system, though. If the Supreme Court says losing your citizenship takes away all that makes life worth living,
Which they have said.
right, how is it legal to strip that right in a civil court where the defendant doesn't even get a guaranteed lawyer? I mean, isn't that like forcing someone to play a high-stakes game without a referee?
Well, it's one of the most debated questions in immigration law right now. But the government's legal theory relies on treating naturalization as a contract.
A contract, okay.
Yeah. They argue that if you obtained your citizenship by lying or hiding a crime, the contract was fraudulent from day one. You never legally had the status to begin with.
Ah, I see. So you cheated the system.
Right. So in their view, civil court isn't punishing you. It's just voiding a faulty contract.
That actually makes a lot of logical sense. But obviously, groups like the ACLU argue that the reality is a punishment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They say the penalty acts exactly like a criminal sentence, yet it strips away the criminal protections. But to really grasp how the government can leverage these civil loopholes today, we have to look backward.
Let's do it.
Because revoking citizenship isn't some brand new invention. It's actually a deeply rooted American tradition that just, well, it took a 50-year nap.
Yeah, that part of the research blew my mind. The modern machinery for this really kicked off with the Naturalization Act of 1906.
Right?
That law created the first statutory rules for revoking citizenship based on fraud. And the numbers from that era are just staggering. Between 1907 and 1967, the U.S. stripped citizenship from over 22,000 Americans.
Yeah. And they cast a really wide net back then, too. They actively targeted left-wing dissidents.
Oh, like Emma Goldman.
Exactly. The famous anarchist Emma Goldman.
Yeah.
The government wanted to get rid of her, so they dug into her husband's naturalization file.
Her husband.
Yeah, because the law back then tied a woman's citizenship status to her husband's. They canceled his citizenship, which automatically vaporized hers. And she was deported in 1919.
That is wild. They also used it against ethnic minorities. I was stunned reading about what happened in the 1920s.
The Indian-American cases?
Yes. Back then, you had to be classified as white or of African descent to naturalize. The Supreme Court suddenly ruled that people from India were legally non-white.
Right.
So the government just went back, rounded up Indian Americans who had already naturalized, and stripped their citizenship. They argued the citizenship was illegally procured just because of their race.
It just shows how malleable the concept of an American has been over the years.
Totally. So you have 22,000 people losing their citizenship over 60 years, but then it just stopped. What caused that massive drop?
Well, the Supreme Court finally stepped in. They hit the brakes in 1967 with a landmark case called Afroyim v. Rusk. The court declared that involuntary denaturalization was mostly unconstitutional. They established that citizenship is a constitutional right, not just a privilege the government can casually revoke.
And that ruling plunged the numbers off a cliff. Between 1968 and 2013, fewer than 150 Americans lost their citizenship.
Yeah, single digits per year.
But today, it is roaring back. And looking at the sources, the real catalyst for this comeback isn't just a change in legal theory. It's technology.
It is all about data. The revival actually started under the Obama administration with a program called Operation Janus.
Operation Janus.
Right. The Department of Homeland Security realized they had these massive warehouses full of old paper fingerprint cards. These belong to people who had deportation orders or criminal histories from decades past.
So the technology to digitize fingerprints actually handed the government the exact tool they needed to look decades into the past.
That's exactly it. They began digitizing hundreds of thousands of those paper fingerprints and running them against current databases of naturalized citizens. They were hunting for anomalies, people who might have used a fake name or altered a birth date to get citizenship after being ordered deported.
And it goes way beyond just digitizing old fingerprints now. I mean, the
Yeah.
sources mention this Amazon cloud software named ATLA.
Yes, ATLAs is huge.
It recently scanned over 16.5 million records. It cross-referenced them against massive databases like the terrorist screening database and national crime records. And it flagged roughly 124,000 people for review.
So we arrive at the core conflict driving the debate today. You combine an incredibly powerful data mining search engine with a civil court system that lets the government prosecute those discrepancies without providing a free lawyer.
Which brings up a really crucial question. What happens when ordinary people get caught in the crossfire of this massive machine?
Right.
Because the ACLU warns this is creating a massive chilling effect. There are 24.5 million naturalized Americans in the U.S. right now. The fear is we're creating a second-class citizenship where they feel they have to constantly look over their shoulders.
Let's look at a specific example from the sources. Take the case of Baljinder Singh.
Okay.
He arrived in the U.S. in the early 1990s as a teenager. He had an immigration court date, but the notice was mailed to a friend's house.
Oh, no.
Yeah. He didn't get it, he missed the court date, and the judge ordered him deported in his absence.
Wow.
Years later, he married an American, applied for citizenship, and got it. Apparently without realizing or disclosing that he had an old deportation order on his record.
And then the Operation Janus data mining caught up with him.
Yes. 12 years after he became a U.S. citizen, the government filed a civil denaturalization case. And because it's civil, he didn't get a public defender.
Right.
He never showed up to the hearing. So the judge just issued a default judgment. With the stroke of a pen, he was stripped of his citizenship.
Stripped by a default judgment because he didn't show up. I mean, he might not even know he lost his citizenship yet.
Exactly.
But then there's the story of Norma Borgoño. And this one really highlights how wide the dragnet has become.
Yeah, this case gets a lot of attention.
Norma is a 53-year-old grandmother. She suffers from a rare kidney disease. She was working as an office manager, and it turned out her boss was running a massive financial fraud scheme.
Right. And when the FBI moved in to investigate, Norma actually stepped up and helped them build the case against her boss.
But she did take a plea deal, right?
She did. She played a minor administrative role. She didn't pocket the fraud money, but she took a plea deal on a minor charge just to put it behind her.
And then the DOJ turned around and targeted her for denaturalization anyway because she was involved in financial fraud.
Right. And the mechanism they use is really interesting. When she applied for citizenship years earlier, the form asked a very broad question. It asked, have you ever committed a crime for which you had not been arrested?
And she checked no.
Right. The government argued in civil court that she should have disclosed her boss's fraud scheme on her citizenship application, even though she hadn't been charged with anything yet.
So they're saying by checking no, she proved she lacked the good moral character required to become a citizen.
Exactly. So now this 63-year-old grandmother is facing deportation to Peru, where she has no immediate family.
And she risks losing the American health insurance that is literally keeping her alive. But again, from the government's strict legal view, she pleaded guilty to fraud. She broke the rules.
Right. Which naturally leads to a massive legal puzzle. This exact issue came up during a 2017 Supreme Court case called Maslanjak.
Right.
During oral arguments, the justices threw out a hypothetical. They pointed out that if the application asked if you have ever committed an offense you weren't arrested for.
Like speeding.
Yes. Couldn't they denaturalize you for failing to mention a 30-year-old speeding ticket?
Exactly. If the application asks if you have ever committed an offense you weren't arrested for, couldn't they just say, hey, you sped in 1995, you lied, you're out? Does the government just hold a permanent trump card over naturalized citizens?
Well, the Supreme Court recognized that danger. They tried to build a guardrail in that Maslanjak decision. They established a standard of materiality.
Materiality. What does that mean?
They ruled that the lie or the omission must have actually played a meaningful role in the person getting citizenship. So theoretically, Failing to mention a decades-old speeding ticket shouldn't trigger denaturalization because a speeding ticket wouldn't disqualify you from becoming a citizen anyway.
Okay, so it's not a material lie,
Right.
but theory and practice are two different things, especially in civil court where you don't have a lawyer.
Exactly. When you are in a civil court without a guaranteed lawyer, trying to argue the nuanced legal definition of materiality against federal prosecutors.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah, those guardrails start to blur.
Yeah.
The DOJ has incredibly wide discretion to file these cases.
So let's pull all these threads together. Denaturalization has undergone a huge shift. It evolved from a rare weapon used against Nazi war criminals into a massive data-driven civil court strategy.
Right.
Fueled by algorithms that can scan millions of records, the government is targeting a much wider array of criminals, fraudsters, and rule breakers.
And while that data mining makes the process ruthlessly efficient at catching fraud, the debate is about the cost to due process.
Right.
Relying on civil courts strips away constitutional protections. It creates profound anxiety for millions of naturalized citizens.
And this matters to you, the listener, whether you were born in the U.S. or naturalized. This debate forces us all to define what American citizenship actually means and how permanent it truly is.
Yeah. Is it an unbreakable right, or is it a contract that demands absolute perfection?
Exactly. I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
Okay.
Think about the basic concept of equality. If a naturalized citizen can lose their passport for a mistake they made decades ago, while a natural-born citizen can commit the exact same crime and keep their rights.
Right.
At what point does a naturalized immigrant ever truly become equal?